We're back with another edition of the Federalist Radio Hour. I'm Emily Jashinsky, Culture Editor here at The Federalist. As always, you can email the show at radio@thefederalist.com. Follow us on Twitter at FDRLST. Make sure to subscribe wherever you download your podcasts as well. Today, we're joined by the host of The Liz Wheeler Show. That would be Liz Wheeler. Liz, thank you so much for joining us today.
Emily, it's my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Now, the show is newly launched, right? It just dropped today, right?
Yeah, first episode launched this morning, 6 a.m., right at the crack of dawn. The first episode launched. We're super excited to see how it's doing.
You can subscribe to The Liz Wheeler Show. You can leave a review. That's the best way to let Liz know that you're watching and that you're enjoying what she's doing. Talk to me about the idea behind the show, Liz. What are you planning to do with this? What is your goal by taking your sort of unique commentary and packaging it into the form of this new program?
Yeah. First of all, I want to say a quick thank you to everybody who has subscribed, who has given a 5-star rating to my new show and left a review. As you all know, that's the best way to climb up the charts on iTunes, which is the best way to make sure that people hear the truth. So many people have done that. It's just been flooded with subscriptions this morning. So thank you to everybody who's done that. If you haven't, please go ahead and do that. We're really excited about the show. I'm very excited about this show. It's a video podcast format, so it's a more personal connection to my audience, which is something that I've wanted for a long time. It's going to be conversations between me and my audience in the sense that I know my audience cares a great deal about research, right? We're all tired of just talking point wars going back and forth. We're tired of the partisan bickering. On my show, we are going to do a deeper dive, right? We are going to actually present the research that underpins so many of the talking points, or that's absent, I should say, in so many of the talking points. And we're going to play offense. So often, the last decades, conservatives have sort of been back on our heels, playing defense, sort of playing defense at the 1-yard line, if you will, as Democrats and radical leftists overtake our cultural institutions, whether that's public schools and universities, marriage, family, Hollywood, music, movies, etc. And I think it's pretty clear at this point that conservatives are not winning the culture war. The reason for that, in my opinion, is because we are playing defense like that, and it's time to say, wait a second. We're not playing by the left's rules anymore. We're going to play offense, and we're going to make sure that we reclaim and restore these institutions that have made our nation what it is.
Now, talk to me about what offense looks like. You have a great op-ed in Newsweek where you talk about how conservatives need to fight back. The title of the op-ed, which again you can read in Newsweek, is "To Win, Conservatives Must Admit We're Losing Opinion." And that's completely correct. Yeah. But not all hope is lost. I mean, I think we're winning in some particular areas. Sex and gender perhaps is being one of them. But what does fighting back and going on offense look like practically in sort of our everyday lives?
Sure. And I would encourage people, if you tune into my show every day, you're going to see this, because I'm not just saying this as the pitch for my show. I don't want to be another pundit screaming into the void. I don't want to just sit around and bellyache and commiserate with other conservatives while we watch our culture go down the tube, right? Sure, that's fun, but we're not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to identify a problem, we're going to expose liberal lies, and then I'm going to give an action item for what our listeners and our viewers can actually do to address the problem. So today's episode, for example, was about Fauci. It was about the NIH. It was about the funding that went to the Wuhan Institute of Virology through a subcontractor directly from the American taxpayer's pocket, right? So I don't think any of us look at that indirectly direct funding from us to this Wuhan Institute of Virology and think that's where I want my paycheck to be going, to dangerous gain-of-function experiments that could lead to very dangerous bat-derived coronaviruses that might infect the world. None of us want that. So what can we do to prevent our money from being spent on those sort of things? Well, in the episode today, I actually give a call to action. I show you exactly what you can do to hold accountable otherwise seemingly unaccountable bureaucrats, because it is frustrating sometimes. You see these executive agencies that are bloated, that have bureaucrats like Fauci, who was appointed, not elected, so we can't just kick him out of office, and we feel helpless. Yeah, we can vote every 4 years, but what can we do now? In my episode today, I give people a direct call to action, what you can do to stop that.
Can you tell me a little bit, like, I've done some reporting on new media and why some of these platforms are just taking off, because there's such a market for pretty much exactly what you're doing. People want to hear the truth. They want to hear it expressed with moral clarity. Can you talk to me a little bit about what you like about this format, about the video format, about being sort of untethered from any news outlet, just sort of being able to do your own thing, have your own voice, and then to package it in these in these videos that you're able to release on your own terms, essentially?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. You're untethered from big tech, so you're uncensored, and you're unencumbered by, the what might be woke corporatism, if you will, at some other networks. You really are independent. You can say what you want without the fear of retaliation. It's like I said, it's a personal connection to your audience that you don't get when you're in any other kind of format. You experience this, I'm sure, on a daily basis on your show, and it's so wonderful. This is a show on my terms, saying what I want, what I know is important to my viewers, and it's an interaction as well. We have a great community, the Liz Wheeler community over on Locals, where my viewers can talk directly to me. They can tell me what's important to them. We can have discussions about issues, and there's obviously other fun stuff that goes on there, but it's a more direct connection. And thankfully at this point, the podcast distributors, that's Spotify, that's Apple, especially Apple, they've been pretty good so far about not censoring podcasts. It's not like posting something on Facebook and getting a fake fact check or getting yanked down on YouTube. And I hope Apple continues it. I give them kudos for allowing free speech to reign over there. It's a good business model. I hope they keep up. So far, they haven't done that. And so it's a good platform for right now to be on the podcast channels, because you really are able to speak the truth and identify reality versus delusion without fear of being censored for it.
What's your experience been like with big tech? How have they treated you? I mean, I assume it's probably the same story that a lot of conservative pundits and thinkers face, but what has your experience looked like trying to get your message out on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter? Have you encountered any of the same problems that a lot of people do?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's been abysmal. So on Facebook page, we built my Facebook page organically. I built it without any money going into it, without any promotion going into it, to the point that I was releasing a video, about a 4-minute video, once a day. One video once a day. And that video would get anywhere between 1 million views to 5 million views. And I do that 5 or 6 days a week, right? And it was completely organic. People would share it. People would comment it. The reach was amazing. We got hundreds of millions of views a year on my Facebook page. Well, as soon as I went independent, literally the same week I went independent, Facebook started smacking my videos with those fake fact checks. The ones that say it's been fact checked by an independent third-party platform. Not so independent. I looked into who exactly was issuing these fact checks, and they're not only funded by Google and Facebook, they're literally tied to the Chinese Communist Party. These are ideological leftists who don't want my content to go out. So when you get a fact check on your video, as your audience I'm sure knows, it causes Facebook to put you in the penalty box. So they restrict your reach. They don't let your video be distributed organically. And so your views go down. So my views went from getting anywhere between 1 million, 5 million, 10 million views a day to I'm lucky now if I get 100,000 views on these videos. And the content, Emily, is the same. So it's not inferior content. That's Facebook. YouTube identifies topics in my videos, almost half of my videos, as being not suitable for advertisers. So they don't want me to make any money off of this. And these are regular political topics. I speak the truth. I speak reality. I'm not bombastic. I'm just identifying what is delusion versus what is reality, objective truth here. And they don't allow me to make any money off of that. And Instagram slaps those covers, those blurred out images that they put over your content when they say a fact checker has identified this as false. If you talk about children wearing masks, you talk about puberty blockers on little kids and what that drug really does to their bodies, any of that kind of content, which again is backed up with science, it's backed up with studies. I cite the information, I cite the facts, and they've stifled me.
Talk about Instagram specifically, because it's a very interesting space, I think, for conservative women and women in general, where a lot of people sort of increasingly get news from Instagram. It wasn't always that way. It's more and more that way now. How important do you think, in your experience as somebody who puts some of this content on Instagram and sees what your audience likes and doesn't like and what they say, how important do you think it is for conservatives to be on that platform with their message?
Oh, very important. I wouldn't be there otherwise, obviously. But I actually don't believe really in the exodus from big tech. I do think it's important that we have competition in the marketplace. If you're not happy with how Facebook's treating you, sure, go join another platform. But if you quit Facebook because of censorship, you've essentially given them what they wanted. First of all, you've left and they don't care about that. But more importantly, you've taken away yourself from watching my videos or other conservative videos, which is then causing my content not to get as much views, which is exactly what Facebook wanted in the first place by censoring me. So I actually don't think that there should be a huge mass exodus. There's always room for more competition in the marketplace, but really conservatives should stay where we are on these big tech platforms, and instead we should instead of running away, we should enforce the laws in the books and make our elected officials enforce the laws in the book, the antitrust laws, the monopoly laws, which Facebook, I think, is very clearly in violation of.
Yeah, that's for sure. You had the, I think, advantage that a lot of people don't have, particularly a lot of journalists don't have, of sort of talking and being in interaction with the base and with sort of regular people on a daily basis when you were over at One American News. And I wonder, especially in the fraught period of the Trump administration, what did you learn from that experience about, conservatives and about regular, ordinary Republicans around the country?
That regular people crave reality. Crave that more than they crave the fraternity of a political party or affiliation. I think that's why we saw so many Democrats or independents vote for Trump, because they weren't as interested in their party affiliation as they were in reality. That's what I see with views on and comments and reaction to my videos too. Like I said before, I am not a bombastic person. I don't engage in sensationalism, but I am willing to speak reality, and I'm willing to speak it bluntly. And if the truth is sensational, then so be it. Right? But people's reaction to that is they want to be spoken to bluntly. They want you to respect them enough to not pretend that something is not true when it obviously is true. They don't want to be told that delusion is reality. That, I think, is the defining lesson from the past 5 years. And this is a lesson that the leadership in the Republican Party needs to understand, because the way that it applies to party leadership is we as Republicans and conservatives shouldn't be playing by the left's rules. Whether it's in political discourse, whether it's in debates, whether it's on Capitol Hill, we shouldn't be allowing the left to play identity politics and Republicans kowtowing to that and say, okay, but we have a diverse party. Well, great, but it's not identity politics that matters. It's the policies that are going to protect individual liberties for everybody that matters. And Republicans in general have made a mistake of trying to be tolerant, and I put tolerant in quotation marks, tolerant, playing by the left's rules instead of realizing that what the American people want to see, the American people want respectful, blunt reality.
Ronald Reagan talked about pale pastels versus bold colors, and I'm curious if you think, actually, because I do, this is my theory, and it's kind of a leading question here, when you speak with the bold colors, or you paint with the bold colors and not the pale pastels, it's actually ultimately politically expedient. It's better for you to not be kind of milquetoast and squishy and hang around in the middle. Do you ultimately think that as conservatives become bolder, and I think emboldened by the culture war and sort of the rapid speed at which things appear to be changing or feel to so many people as though they are changing, do you think ultimately that actually helps the conservative message going forward, as long as conservative messengers are packaging that message boldly?
Definitely. I mean, conservatives across the country crave bold leadership, whether that's on Capitol Hill or whether that's, what you and I do, thought leadership in media. We do. Conservatives want bold leadership. The only thing that conservatives need to make sure that we differentiate between is being bombastic and sensationalist versus being bold and calm and letting the truth be sensational. If that's the case, you can look across the country, and the different people in leadership, whether it's in the media or whether it's people in elected office, those who are tying themselves first to their principles and then refusing to back down to the bullying from the radical left and being bold in their leadership, those are the people that are being successful and making a difference.
What are the takeaways from the past year? Because as we're taping this podcast today, and as you've launched your show today, there has been a lot of chatter in the media about the 1-year anniversary of George Floyd's killing. What do you think some of the takeaways from this extremely chaotic and difficult year, where we had a pandemic combined with, or you could add that the riots were part of the pandemic, were a consequence of unemployment and lockdowns. What do you think we've learned, or we should learn, about this country and maybe just about people in general over the course of the last 12 months?
Yeah, and today is the anniversary of the death of George Floyd. My episode of The Liz Wheeler Show tomorrow talks about the verdict in the Derek Chauvin trial and why that verdict ought to be overturned if we want to exist in a fair criminal justice system. So I hope people will tune in tomorrow to hear about that. The biggest lesson of the last year, I think, is that we have allowed our government officials far too much power. You cannot look at the federal level, the state level, the local level when it comes to COVID-19 restrictions and mandates and draw any other conclusion. You cannot look at, a bus driver slapping the face of a 10-year-old girl who pulled her mask down below her nose because she felt sick, slapping her in the face and think, okay, this is normal. This is how we should be acting. This is in the good of public health. No, you cannot look at, the fear and the closures of the business, people's job loss, the degradation, the economy that's contracted, the mental health issues, the suicide skyrocketing. You can't look at that and think this happened naturally and this is fine and we needed to do this. No, the takeaway from this is that government officials who did not follow the science deferred to their ideology at great, great human cost to the American people, to our freedoms and to our personal family lives, our businesses and our children and our spouses and our parents. And it should be incumbent on conservatives, not just in the elections, but now, to hold leaders who abuse their power accountable and to make sure legislatively that these leaders, whether it's public health officials who are appointed or elected governors and mayors, that they don't have the power to ever do that again.
One thing that has been interesting over the course of the past year is, if we put ourselves back in our shoes at this exact day in 2020, there were a lot of conservatives at the time who were saying, the American people will not stand for these lockdowns. This lockdown, there's an expiration date on this. It will stop. And what's been interesting to me about how this all unfolded is that was absolutely true of a chunk of the population. I don't know how big that chunk is. I can't really quantify it. That's been difficult. But then you have this other chunk of the population, which is also difficult to sort of quantify and know how big it is. But it seems way bigger than you would ever imagine, of Americans that are just going with the flow and in some cases seem now to crave more government authority and control and direction in their personal lives. Did you get that sense as well? And how would you explain, this segment of the American population actually inviting and asking for more government control in their lives? It seems so anathema to the spirit of the country.
Well, that's what they're taught to do, right? In the public school system, they're taught not to question authority. They're indoctrinated that, everything is an emergency, whether that be private ownership of firearms, whether that be racism, whether that be climate change. They're taught that in an emergency, it's appropriate for the government to come in and restrict your rights because we're all in this together. They're products. The vast majority of our population right now, or at least the majority in the sense that they go along with these mandates, they've been indoctrinated. They're the products of a public school education. This goes back to what we're going to do so much on the Liz Wheeler Show. We're going to talk about these cultural institutions that are so important. We as conservatives ceded the public school system and the university system to the radical leftists decades ago. 50, 60, 70 years ago. And this is the product of doing that. You get a class of people who aren't skeptical of authority, as they should be given the history of our country. They don't question when they're told what to do, when they're given orders. They don't want to take responsibility for themselves. They want to be, quote, taken care of, even if it means sacrificing their liberty. This is what happens when you cede those cultural institutions. You get sort of a sheep majority in our nation. I think that's what we're seeing, sadly.
Maybe this is actually connected in a weird way to what we just talked about. But you mentioned just a couple of minutes ago that mental health crises and suicides have been, some of these numbers are terrible from what we've seen over the last year. But a lot of those numbers were going up before the pandemic even hit. What do you make of that? What do you think is at the root of the mental health crises in America? And I say that might be related to what we just talked about because, I do think there's a lot of the messaging that we get from our culture that puts us in a difficult position psychologically.
Right. Well, I think, at the root of it is the crisis of the family, right? People don't have the support system that they had. There's also a religious crisis in our nation. People don't have faith, and so they don't have the support of their church community. They don't have the belief in something greater than themselves. I can't imagine, to be honest, living my life and experiencing hardships that I've experienced. I can't imagine how I would have gotten through that without both a solid family structure, not just my husband, but my sisters and my parents and, my friends and my extended family. I can't imagine going through that without having faith that God will never abandon you and without having your family to support you. And those things have been ripped down, Emily. They've been degraded in our country. So many people aren't as lucky as I am. They don't have that. They face hardship. They face tragedy. They face death. They face all kinds of difficult situations, and they have nothing to lean on. What does that lead you to? Well, that leads you to a mental health crisis. You don't know how to process it. You don't know what to do about it. You don't value yourself as a child of God. You don't value your body as a temple of the Holy Spirit. You don't know what to do. And so it either leads to self-harm or just mental illness.
What do you think conservatives' message to women in particular should be? And I don't mean to play identity politics here, but I do think it's pretty important to, for conservatives especially, because there does seem to be such unhappiness with women in this country. I think of the New Yorker cover from December that had the woman at her desk surrounded by trash on the floor, but with a martini in her hand, and she was dressed up on top for Zoom. What do you think the conservative message, what should conservatives be saying to women in this country about, how to live the best life?
I mean, listen, if I were to be on the cover of the New Yorker in a similar pose, I'd have like a baby under my arm, my baby under my arm, dirty diapers on the floor, and trying to stay hydrated as I do media hits. Let me tell you, I'm happy as a clam. That's what we should be telling women, that you're amazing. Your womanhood is a gift from God. You are not only given a mind to be intellectual and to defend our country, you were given an incredible womanly body that allows you to create life, to nurture life. You were given the tendency to be a nurturer versus a warrior. In many cases, not all, but that is typical of a lot of women, and that's good. The old adage, the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world, we should get back to that. We should be celebrating women. We should be teaching little girls that they're powerful and made in the image of God, that they get to take part in the most powerful thing of all, God's creation, when they create a family, when they have babies, and that it's okay to make those choices. If you want to have a high-powered career, great, more power to you. If you want to be a stay-at-home mom, great, even more power to you. The feminist idea that women should not go to work is an overcompensation for women who weren't allowed to work. We should be offered that choice. We should be able as individuals to say, well, what do I want to do? Do I want to have a family? Do I want to have a high-powered job? Or do I want to have a hybrid of both? But I should be allowed to make that choice, and whatever choice I make should be respected. That's not what feminists advocated for. Feminists degraded women who loved their children and wanted to stay home and rear their children and educate their children, and instead said, you are not worth enough. You are not worthy if you do not bring home a monetary paycheck. That is how we are calculating your worth. And conservatives should come out so strongly against that. It's utter nonsense.
What has your experience been with female listeners and viewers? What do you hear from them? I mean, have you heard that for many of them, it was just a matter of seeing someone like yourself say these things with moral clarity, and then they were able to kind of think about them differently? In your experience, are so many people just struggling because there's a total lack of representation in the corporate media, which shuts down the voices of conservative women, just hearing an articulate and strong conservative defense of some of these ideas?
Absolutely. Whenever I say something like that, and this is a topic I talk about at conferences a lot, so whenever I talk about that, my inbox, Emily, is flooded with women who said, yes, that's what I felt. I just never knew how to say it. I knew that, and I'm so happy you said that, because I know my worth is in my family and my children, but I feel judged. I feel judged by high-powered women with jobs, or by the media, or by pop culture standards who tell me that I'm only worth as much as my paycheck is worth. And so I think that there's a huge market, if you will, for telling this to women, because you can do both. You can raise a family and make a difference in politics or have a job. You can do a hybrid. I mean, actually, that might be one of the benefits of the COVID-19 economy, is we now know for a fact that you can do your job in a flexible way. You can do your job from home. You can do your job online, or sometimes in the office and sometimes online. That's ideal for women and families. That's ideal for women to be able to know that they have a choice to do that and to feel affirmed in that choice. We should affirm them.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I wonder what you think are we ultimately right now do you have a glass half full or glass half empty perspective on America? Because there's so many people on the right, and I understand it, who are glass half empty. And I think there's a very reasonable argument to be made for that. But then I also struggle with how sometimes we lose our perspective on what a wonderful country this is, and what a miraculous country this is, really, with our freedoms and how many people are able to enjoy them. Are you ultimately right now glass half full or glass half full or glass half empty?
Well, listen, I always say that if I weren't optimistic about the future of our country, then I wouldn't be doing what I was doing. If I thought that this was a loss, I would chalk it up as a loss and I would go about my merry way. I wouldn't spend my time fighting a losing battle. I mean, it is demoralizing sometimes to hear about the assault on our freedom, and it's certainly disappointing when, we experience losses, whether it's cultural or whether it's in elections. But look at what our country has been through. Look at how we have prevailed. I mean, the stuff that has happened to our country or happened in our country, that's some really serious stuff. Not only did we stage a revolution to take our freedoms back from the tyrant King George, we then had slavery, we had civil rights. And I'm not just talking about civil rights for Black people. I'm talking about for women. FDR put Asians in internment camps, right? We've prevailed. We were the defining force in World War II that helped free the world from Nazis. We have prevailed so many times over challenges so much greater than what we're facing. If you don't read the history, it might look like this is insurmountable. But if you read history, it'll do nothing but make you feel that this is a winning fight. It's not going to be easy. It's not something that's going to happen tomorrow, but it's something that's worth fighting for and that we can win.
Did you see earlier today the video of John Cena speaking fluently in Mandarin, apologizing to China, I believe, for acknowledging Taiwan as a country?
That's what happens when you do too many steroids.
It's crazy to see somebody like John Cena, who has carried the banner of American patriotism and who has really been a patriot in Hollywood and in our popular culture. One thing we haven't talked about yet is popular culture. And to see somebody like John Cena doing something so stupid and so obviously un-American.
Financially motivated, though, right?
Right, absolutely, yeah.
Because they want the Chinese market for all their movies. The Chinese market censors them if they have anything anti-China or pro-American in that. These Hollywood celebrities literally are being held hostage by China, and you can see which ones are caving. I mean, John Cena is obviously one.
Right. And that's what the arc of John Cena is, such an interesting one, that he would ever, even for the sake of, the guy is a millionaire, a million times over, maybe. He has a lot of money. He doesn't need it. Maybe his studio does, and that's why it was forced. But what do you think about the state of popular culture in this country? Do you think that it's contributing? I think the answer is probably, obviously, yes. But how do you think it's contributing to the sense of malaise and stagnation and decadence that we're in right now?
Well, our generation truly has never been denied anything, or at least denied the opportunity to try for anything. We've never experienced the type of hardship that previous generations have experienced. And we're really lucky, and I'm really grateful for previous generations for handing us the country that we're now experiencing. But especially millennials, who I believe are 25 to 40 right now, we're kind of a soft generation. We really are. Less than 1% of people in our country have even served in the military. So it's not even like, and those people certainly are not soft, except perhaps the one in the Army ad that was just released. But it's an incredible thing to behold. It's an incredible thing to watch what happens when people who have never been denied anything are in the situation that we're in.
Absolutely. As a millennial, I completely agree with that. It's been amazing to sort of watch what's happened as the culture coddled us millennials in the 90s until right now we're all running the workforces of the country. And I think the experiment is playing out rather unsuccessfully.
Yeah, we're inventing hardship for ourselves. And when I say inventing hardship, I guess I should put quotes around hardship, because we're inventing problems that don't exist, because maybe it is inherent to the human spirit to want to overcome, to want to be a victor, to want to be a champion, not to want to be a victim. And so we're inventing these things so that we can pretend to overcome them, not realizing that these institutions in our country were built to protect us from actual hardship.
I think you see that in the expansion of terms like violence and racism and white supremacy. Yeah. It really is contrived. Right. Absolutely. Well, Liz Wheeler, host of The Liz Wheeler Show, the newly launched Liz Wheeler Show, where can people subscribe to the program?
Yeah, definitely. Anywhere that you get your podcasts, you can go to Apple iTunes, you can go to Spotify, anywhere that you get your pods. If you want to watch it in video form, you can go to YouTube, you can go to Rumble. We should be just about everywhere that you want to watch it. Please do subscribe, though. I know I asked before. Please do, especially on iTunes. Give a 5-star rating, give a review, glowing review, of course, no nasty ones. And that's how you help us climb the charts. And I really appreciate it and can't wait to hear what you all think of the episodes this week.
Well, Liz, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Emily.
We'll be back soon with more. Until then, be lovers of freedom and anxious for the fray.